before we get started today on the case, I want to just, again, every once in a while, just sort of step back and let's sort of take stock of where we've been, what we've learned, and then we're going to talk a little bit about sort of where we're going. So, so far, as you know, we started out trying to make sure we understood sort of what is strategy, and we've learned that a clear strategy provides clear answers to sort of the four questions: where we compete, and why is that an attractive place to compete? We're trying to, address attractive markets and arenas. Then how do we offer unique value in those markets? How do we deliver that unique value better than competitors? And then how do we try and create some sustainable competitive advantage? What you've also learned is that we compete. Firms compete in an industry. There's a structure to that industry that influences performance of all of the firms in that industry. That's one of the determinants of the profitability of a firm. The other is then how well they are able to create unique value relative to those competitors in that firm. And that basically you tend to choose one of these two generic strategies: cost or differentiation. We also talked a little bit about a sort of a value strategy, which could be viewed as kind of in between, but cost and differentiation tend to be the two generic strategies we talk about in strategy. And then what we've been doing the last few sessions is talking about what I call strategy vehicles. These are ways that you can create competitive advantage, or ways that you can deliver unique value. So one way to do that is with your choice of make versus buy. If you do a better job of choosing the make versus buy option like Nike did, they were able to create competitive advantage because they outsourced more than Adidas and the competition. We talked about how strategic alliances can be a way that you can access resources from other firms, you connect them with yours, and that sort of notion of two firms or two heads are better than one, that helps you to then deliver unique value better than the competition. So it could come through strategic alliances. We didn't talk specifically about mergers and acquisitions. This is actually a slightly modified version of the text that I've given you. But that would be another way. Like alliances, is one way to access resources. You could also acquire them through an acquisition. And you have to think about different ways that you try and grow the business. When we talked about Starbucks, we looked at sort of what are their resources and capabilities and what are their options then for growth. How can they leverage those going forward? And then last time we started talking about international strategy and introduced this notion that the way you're structured in your company actually influences your ability to implement your strategy. And that your structure, your organization design influences what you will be able to do, whether you're more decentralized or more centralized, influences what you'll be able to do. And then if you're competing on an international stage, you can win because of economies of scale. In scope, you got more volume, but you have to make this choice about whether or not we're going to have a standard product that we're going to just sell to everybody around the globe. We're going to try and get scale economies. We're going to be a cost. We're going to try and win through cost. Or whether we're going to try and differentiate in different markets and use more of a multi-domestic strategy, and that requires, again, a much more decentralized structure. Okay, so that's sort of, we've sort of gone through here. We're now going to talk about disruptive business models and disruptive strategies and innovation. This is going to be the focus over the next few sessions. Competitor interaction and game theory and all of the things around dynamics of strategy going back and forth, you're going to get that actually in your next course with Professor Bryce, Business Management 481. Okay? So today sort of marks the first day of a set of sessions where we're really trying to understand strategy in terms of innovation and what can you do to offer something that's new and different to the market. Because in a real sense, that's what strategy is all about, right? We've looked at a lot of these firms that have been successful over time, and somehow they either had the foresight or the luck, or the lucky foresight, to come up with something that was new to the market, that was different, and it worked. Okay, so that's really what our focus is going to be on for the next few sessions. So let's start. I have Spencer and Brady and Blake. I want you to the three of you to help us get started on the case. But before we do that, I actually what else have I got here? Logan. Logan. This case is entitled "New Business Models in Home Video Entertainment." So before we jump into the sort of strategies of the different companies, can you help us understand what is a business model? We're going to sort of define that, because one of the things I want to have each of the folks I've called on do is sort of help us to understand what is the business model, the strategy, and the business model of each of the different main competitors: Blockbuster, Netflix, and Redbox.
Okay. A business model is your plan and layout to succeed in a market. It's your strategy.
Okay, so that's why I'm asking this question. Does business model equal strategy?
I'd say strategy is more. I'd say business model is more intensive because that includes cost structure and everything like that.
And strategy doesn't include cost structure?
Strategies, to me, is more your plan to get to a certain point, whether that's market share or profitability or whatever it is.
Okay.
But business model has to be.
So we know this is the plan. This is this plan to achieve competitive advantage, right? To gain and sustain competitive advantage. So it's to gain, sustain competitive advantage. And the business model somehow is related to strategy. We hear all the time, I hear business model used interchangeably with strategy when I read things. So I'm just curious. I want to. This is the reason I'm starting out with this today, is because I think there's a lot of confusion about what a business model is and how it might be different from strategy. Richard?
I don't think they're equal to each other, but they influence each other. Like a business model is more like what your business currently is, how they capture and deliver value.
Okay.
And the strategy looks more at, well, how do we want to change this to get an advantage? How do we want to capture more value? Looking more towards the future and what steps you're going to take. So your business model influences your strategy, and your strategy will ultimately influence your business model, but they're not the same.
Okay, so I'm gonna just add, sort of make it. This is your activity choices for how you create and capture value. Yeah.
So I think your strategy is what you're trying to do, and your business model is how you're trying.
It's a little bit more the how you're trying to do it. So this often actually, when we think about business model, it actually often fits. If we think about the 4 questions that a good strategy will answer, which of those questions does it address best? The how, right? How are we delivering? How are we trying to deliver the unique value? That's really sort of our business model. It's a set of activities that we choose to perform, and how we choose to perform them, and why we think it will allow us to deliver that low-cost strategy or differentiated strategy or whatever we're trying to do. Austin?
So would an example in the reading, would an example be for Netflix, their strategy was to differentiate and to have all the online resources, and then the business model was they had 50 warehouses and 90,000 movies available. Is that how?
Yeah, so what we're going to do, one of the ways that I think is really helpful to understand a company's business model is you actually sketch out or map out their value chain. And you look at sort of what are all of the activities that are engaged in the value chain, and how do those work together, and you can look at the cost of the different activities, and how does that allow them to deliver unique value. And then there's also then the capturing the value. A lot of that has to do with the way they decide price. What's their pricing strategy? What's their revenue? What we think of sometimes as their revenue model is how do they make money? And this has to do, sometimes it's a free strategy where they don't charge the user, but they charge, and they they charge someone who wants to advertise to those users. Or maybe it's subscription, or maybe it's just a price for the product. There are different ways that you can try and generate revenue streams from those customers. So if we think about this, these are the activity choices for how you create and capture value. And a lot of people will actually argue then that in some ways, business model is a subset of strategy. Because one of the things we haven't talked about a lot yet in this class, and is really saved more for the next class, is what's your approach to how you respond to competition? That's part of strategy, right? If you think about a chess game, it's how do you respond to moves and counter moves of the competition. Business model doesn't tell you anything about how you respond to the moves and counter moves of the competition. It may tell you what you're able to do or what you're constrained in doing, because this is the activities that you perform. But it doesn't necessarily give you sort of guidance around how you respond to the competition. So there's a whole other sort of framework and theory about competitor interaction, and there's a whole literature around what's called game theory in economics that sort of helps you to understand that. All right, so that said, let's talk about the strategies and the business models of Blockbuster and Netflix and Redbox. And Spencer, why don't you start?
Sure.
Let's talk about Blockbuster. When they come into the market, let's just think about their strategy. And then what we want to do is we're going to sketch out their business model, the activities of their business model.
Okay. So with VHS, the proliferation of VHS, Blockbuster came in with saying, hey, everyone loves movies. We're now going to have various shops located throughout the country. You can come rent the movie, borrow it for a couple of days, bring it back, and the quicker that happens, the more profits the Blockbuster will receive. So their strategy is just
So it's really their market is home video, right?
Entertainment, yeah.
That's pretty much what they're doing. They're not doing a lot of other stuff, right?
Yeah.
And their unique value.
I mean, it's video in the home. Other video stores existed, but Blockbuster started to purchase these out. It was a large-scale business, various locations. But the unique value is video in the home, access to a large library of DVDs.
Okay, so access. How large is the library?
Typically 1,000.
Okay, so what we might think of as access to a pretty large library. There were other competitors at the time, tended to be smaller, fewer titles, but they had access to a large set of roughly maybe 1,000 titles. This is pretty convenient, right? Because they have at their peak, how many stores? Remember how many stores they got to?
Over 9,000. Yeah,
over 9,000. So at their peak, they've got, we get down to their resources and capabilities. At one point they've got 9,000 stores that are they try to be conveniently located so people can access movies. Okay.
Can I ask something? If we're going to isolate just Blockbuster at that time, I mean, they did have a unique business model. I mean, that was new.
It was new at the time.
So
There were not, they're relative to mom and pops, they had a few more titles, a little bit bigger, and they had more stores.
So they had a standardized process.
And they also invested a little bit more in, a lot of people say that the other thing is, they invested a lot more in their brand, so that people knew what Blockbuster was. So they had sort of consistency across stores, and they were good at sort of managing the stores. Okay. We won't talk about their sustainability, because we can see that it was not very sustainable, right? But what I would like to do is, Spencer, have you sort of walk us through the value chain, in a sense, the business model, how they offer their value. So where does it start?
So do you want me to go through the 9 points listed in the chapter?
No. But what I want to do is actually just sort of walk through the how does Blockbuster get a movie to a customer?
Yeah. So it starts out, there's like three 3 different areas. So it starts out first would be warehouses,
Okay? So they have warehouses,
and then the second would be stores.
and that goes to stores,
Correct. Yeah. So they're 9,000 plus stores,
okay?
and then to the end consumer.
And then to the customer. And by the way, they've got to be getting their movies from somewhere, so where do they get the,
Yeah, I mean, probably deals with studios or just
Okay.
movies.
so there's actually a step earlier
Okay.
where it's studios are really, you know, the main source of movie content, or could be television shows, different studios, but they've got to source them. So they go to the studios, they access the movies, they send them to their warehouses, the warehouses shoot them to the stores, and the stores sell them to the customers.
So implicit in that is 9,000 stores with 1,000 DVDs per store is a lot of DVDs.
1,000 DVDs per store. So implicit in that is that you actually have, what is your investment in stores here?
You're gonna have, so the components of the investment, you're gonna have, you're gonna be paying the utilities for these 9,000 stores, managerial fees for these 9,000 stores. You're gonna be stocking these 9,000 stores with several DVDs, lots of DVDs,
Okay.
and very different than Netflix.
Let's just take the sort of upfront cost to build the stores.
Okay.
What is the rough, what would the rough cost be, given we know that the franchise fee basically represents the cost of building the store?
It's like $200,000 to $800,000 depending on, or $400,000 to $800,000 depending on where it was at.
Two to 400,000.
200,000 to 400,000,
Yeah.
depending on where it's at. So let's say, let's take 300,000. How much, what is that investment? Anybody?
For all the stores.
For all the stores, for 9,000 stores. And you can say a lot, and we all know it's a lot, but we want a little more precision, once again, than a lot. How much, what is it? 27 billion or 2.7 billion? 2.7 billion? Are we sure? We have a calculator? Okay, so 2.7 billion, right? So the stores themselves, this is just the cost to build them. This isn't the cost to run them or put labor in them. We're looking at 2.7 billion dollars investment to build all those stores. That's a pretty big investment. We don't have data in this case on inventories, but as you've indicated, the inventories have got to be pretty great, right? Because if you think about it, 9,000 stores, how many per store? 1,000. How often do they rotate them? What do you think? Some are going to be weekly, but so this question is, on average, how often are you turning over that full inventory of VHS or DVDs? Maybe once every quarter? Once every 3 months, you probably, because you are rotating them all the way along, but you know, you probably have some that run, 3 months. You're going to have some that stay, but you're probably looking at maybe once a quarter. So if that's right, then how many DVDs do you have to buy a year for the 9,000 stores? 36 million. Okay, and what does that cost you? Let's say you get them for $1. A lot. Okay, so you see, what we're getting into now is that you sometimes you've got to make educated guesses. You could go and try and get this data, of course, but sometimes you can just sort of make what's an educated guess around some of this, and 36 million titles. You're probably maybe spending at least $1 a title, right? Because they figure you're going to rent it for 3 or 4, and you're not going to. They don't want you to be able to get it back in one rental. Otherwise, you'd think they'd get into that business. So it's going to cost you somewhere. I mean, how much does it cost for a DVD? Maybe $6, $7. Yeah, you're thinking if they're selling it retail for 15 to 20, right? They're going to probably. You might be able to get it for $5, $6, $7 I mean, we could do an estimate, but on the low end, probably 6 times 36 million.
268 million.
268, very good. All right, so we're looking at about 270 million in inventories every year that you've got. So you put 2.7 billion into stores and 270 million in inventories each year. And then, of course, you have to build the warehouses. We don't know how much they cost. And I don't think there's even data on how many there are. But it's clearly going to be some fraction of the 27 billion. I'm not sure exactly what the proportion is, but maybe 5 or 10%. You may be, if you're putting 2.7 billion here, you may be putting 270 million into warehousing, and then of course you have to staff the stores with labor. So how many people do you have to put in a store to run a store? Yeah.
Well, I mean, so.
Anybody here worked at a Blockbuster? Seen people working at a Blockbuster? Probably 2 people per store. You probably get away with
I have
that.
some friends, and it's not real high quality labor, so you're
That's why nobody's admitting that they ever worked in a Blockbuster. These are like high school students, right? Or maybe not college students. So you're probably paying them
$8 an hour.
$8 an hour, something like that. But you probably have to have 2 people in the store.
Yeah, and weekends probably 4 or 5.
Okay, so if you think about then 9,000 stores, 2 people, let's even say 2 people per store, and then you're paying them basically almost minimum wage. Let's say $10 an hour, everything thrown in. What's that going to cost you per year? 18,000 people, $10 an hour. How many hours a year do people work typically? 2,000 is sort of a standard. This is U.S. of course. If you go to Asia, it's a lot more. If you go to Europe, it's less.
700 to 1 billion, 700 million to 1 billion, something like that.
700 million?
Yeah.
Okay.
I did a $40,000 for those 2 employees, because one of them's got to be a manager, so.
Yeah, so it's probably got to be a little bit more.
Yeah.
So we're saying that the labor in the stores, if we're doing 2 people, 1 manager, you're saying it's about 700 million.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, I did 40,000, and it's like, yeah.
We realize, we're not going to go for spurious accuracy. It's not 720 million, 690 million. We don't know. It could be as low as 500 million. It could be as much as 700, 800, 850. But this is sort of a ballpark figure. Okay. So, are you guys excited about this business model?
They were making bank.
I was going to say, in 1994, they sold this company to Viacom for how much? $8.4 billion. Okay, this company had some serious market value. Okay, at one point in time, Blockbuster, 1994, I think is when they sold, or maybe it was 95, but 8.4 billion is the value of that company. Unfortunately, 2 years later, it was only worth half that. And 10 years later, it's worth 1/10 that, right? So the value dropped precipitously. And that was because of course, the competition that came in. So let's move to Netflix. All right, so Netflix now jumps into this market. And Brady. So Brady, tell us about Netflix strategy and their business model.
Okay, I'd say the market they compete in would be not so much home video, but home DVD.
Okay.
Well, actually, exactly that, yeah, home DVD.
Yeah.
Their unique value, I would say, is that I guess the way that the company came to be was because the CEO or the founder of it was sick of having to pay late fees at places. So they had a different offering by having...
So Blockbuster's ruining the day that they charge those late fees, right?
Yeah.
But of course, as we know from this business model, you can't just let people hold them because then you can't rent it to somebody else.
Yeah.
So you got to charge them, right? So they've got to get them back quickly in order for them to be profitable. Okay. So we know. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to here we're going to look at Netflix business model right here. And let's think about, so basically we're saying same markets that they're addressing. Unique value relative to Blockbuster, how would you characterize it?
They have access to over 90,000 titles compared
Okay.
to just 1,000.
Okay, so there's actually more titles, 90,000 instead of 9,000, so we give you a lot more options.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's one clear advantage in terms of value. What else?
In terms of, I guess if Blockbuster is more convenient and they were more on the end of being able to, even more convenient from ordering online, but also you got unlimited rentals for your subscription fee, which was
Okay.
huge.
So we're going to give you more titles.
Yeah.
It's going to be convenient. It's going to be mailed to your door. And we'll start with the initial. There's mailing and then streaming. But
Yeah.
either way, it's a lot more convenient
Yeah.
for the average person. Now, this is the average person that has that has an address. So for some people, you might not, have internet service perhaps to be able to order and select your movies, right? And so there may be a certain segment of the population who don't have internet service provider, don't have computers, can't easily order. But for the most part, most people, at least in the United States, can access this service. And so it's more convenient. And the other thing is on the pricing. Like you said, for the frequent watcher, you might argue this isn't any more expensive, right? Because I can now get I can get lots of movies for a subscription rate. Okay, so this is a different way of pricing. So when we think about, this is probably more attractive for the frequent watcher, let's say. Okay? And what are the resources and capabilities they have to?
They had 50 warehouses, I believe, nationwide.
Okay.
They too, I believe, invested a lot into their brand. I remember seeing so many ads and things like that. I just think that they, especially later when they had just a great, being able to stream videos online, I think is huge as well. It's the fastest, most convenient way to watch a movie in the world. So.
Okay, so they have all these warehouses, and they have to develop the sort of the fulfillment skills,
Yeah.
right? They've got to have technology. They actually have to have a really easy-to-use website. This becomes very important for someone at Netflix. You've got to be able to jump on that website very quickly, see what movie options there are, be able to quickly and easily select the movie, see what your queue looks like. So in terms of technology, they actually spend a lot more on technology than Blockbuster does, right?
Yeah.
So technology, website, they've got to be really sort of easy to use.
Yeah.
And then of course, there's these sort of relationships with these studios, the providers of content, becomes important. Because they're not just buying DVDs or movies and then turning around and renting them. In the streaming, they actually have to have a relationship that they are actually, there's a way to sort of count how often, you stream a movie and the movie studio wants to get paid for the number of times that happens. So it becomes a little bit more complex. All right. Yes?
So
Spencer?
in addition to the 50 warehouses, they also have 50 shipping points. So there was 97% of customers are within the one day shipment.
Okay. So they've got their warehouses and they've got their 50, and then this goes to shipping points, right? So we've got 50 shipping points. Because what's the disadvantage of Netflix relative to Blockbuster?
You have a plan?
Yeah. What is it?
You have to plan ahead.
You got to plan ahead. Yeah, I mean, with Blockbuster, I want to see a movie tonight, I go get it. With Netflix, I want to see a movie tonight, it's like, oh, I should have planned that last week or a few days ago. So you actually have to plan ahead. And over here, you don't have to plan ahead. That's one of the advantages here. It's more convenient for someone who doesn't like to plan ahead. They want to just be able to grab it. So, so they do this extra step of shipping points because they're trying to make it so if you can get it in a couple of days, then it's less of a disadvantage. So they incur the additional cost. But those shipping points then take it directly to your customer, right? So Brady, you see Netflix emerge as a competitor to Blockbuster. And you are, you now know something about strategy. One of the first things you would probably want to do if you were looking at a new company, if you're an analyst, one of the first things you'd want to do is you'd want to map out their business model and compare it with the incumbents. You look at this business model versus this business model, and what do you conclude?
Netflix has a significant cost advantage over Blockbuster by eliminating the brick and mortar stores.
Okay. And are they pricing really aggressively on price here?
No.
Not really.
So, no.
But they do have. Why aren't they aggressive? Why aren't they aggressively pricing? They don't have to. Why don't they have to? Because they got the differentiation of being more convenient for many, for those that want it, and more titles. So they have a differentiation advantage. So why should we give up the cost advantage? Or, why should, even though we have this huge cost advantage, there's no particular reason that we should drop our prices to the customer. We just have to price it so that you order, if we're pricing, and they were usually at somewhere between $10 and $15, $16 per month. Well, the average person rents 3 or 4 DVDs, and they figure, oh, this way I got the convenience that comes to my home, and it's the same as if I went to Blockbuster once a week and rented a movie. So you have much lower costs, and if you think about return on invested capital, we haven't really talked about this so much in this class so far, but we will today because different business models produce different returns on invested capital. That make sense? So if we think about Blockbuster, how much is Blockbuster making in terms of their return on sales? Remember Spencer and Brady at Netflix? Let's compare. Let's look at Blockbuster as early as in the earlier days when they're making money, because the 2005 2010 they're losing money.
Operating income?
Yeah, income to sales. Let's do net income to sales.
Net income, even in 2002, was negative. So operating income is 6.6% of sales, but net income in 2002 was negative 29.
Okay. So, and that's because they're adding depreciation on after their operating income, right? And this is where you got to get the stores and all of that. And we now can see stores aren't cheap, right? That total around stores, in fact, their depreciation tends to be about 10% of sales, I think. That's what it says from the case. All right. So, so if you look at the returns that they're getting, and I think in 2000, in the table, it has at the back, I think it was about 1.5%, something like 1.5%. So we're looking at 1.5%. We compare that to Netflix. What's Netflix income to sales? So if we're going to compare these different business models, it's important for us to understand how much more or less profitable one is than the other, right? So
what year specifically? Netflix 2005?
Let's take 2005 for Netflix.
So operating income is 0.4% and net income is 6.2.
6.2%, right? Okay. So 6.2% versus, when Blockbuster's profitable, 1.5%. I actually went back and looked, and they actually did get up to about 6%, about the same when you go back to 1994. Is they were about the same in profitability as Netflix. Netflix seems to be coming in around 6-7% as their profitability. So now my question is, let's say Blockbuster's making 6% and Netflix is making 6%. Which one would you prefer to invest in? Netflix. And why Netflix? Lower fixed cost. Yes.
So one thing, like when you look at the balance sheets, Netflix is a lot more versatile than Blockbuster. Just looking at their cash assets and cash equivalents, it is almost 58% of their total assets in cash. So Netflix is able to move, grab you opportunities much more quickly than Blockbuster had 80% of their assets and liabilities, like compared. So Blockbuster's just really slow moving mammoth, and Netflix can move around and grab.
Yeah, so if you look at assets that are employed in the business, what you want to do is you go to your balance sheet, you take your assets, you subtract your cash, because that's very flexible. And at least the, sort of a quick and dirty way is take your assets, subtract your cash, and that gives you a sense of what capital you have employed in the business to generate the returns. And you're saying if you look at it for Netflix,
So Netflix.
you know what those assets are? Does it say?
Yeah, so like its return on capital.
Yeah.
Netflix, depending on which method you use, has between 18 and 27% return on capital, while Blockbuster between -14 and -22%.
That's a pretty big difference. Positive 20 to 30, you said
18 to 27.
19 to 27. So this is return on sales, income to sales. But now if we think about return on sales, return on capital employed in the business, it looks even, this was basically comparing this to this, right? The Netflix, or was this even when
It
they
was
were?
2005.
It's 2005, so they were a little bit worse off, but they still probably would have been close to zero.
Yeah.
What you find is that the return on capital then is actually much higher for Netflix than it is for Blockbuster, even if they had similar return on sales. And it's because of all of that investment in stores, warehouses, inventory that you need to have at Blockbuster that you don't necessarily need to have at Netflix.
Can I ask
Yes.
you a question, Dr. Dyer?
Uh-huh.
Are you going to turn it on me?
No?
All right.
I might. I don't know.
So, 58% of assets in cash and cash equivalents seems really high. Perhaps I would even go as far as saying not extremely wise when you could be investing that in something that's going to generate a return. So why would they have 58% of their assets
In cash?
In cash or cash equivalents?
Yeah, because they have, so what they want is the flexibility to make investments, but it's not clear what those next investments should be. Because they've built the warehouses, they now have the coverage, right? The shipping points. What they're likely going to have to figure out is how much they're going to need to put in technology to do streaming technology, to be able to get people a movie or a TV show or whatever on any device, any place, easily accessible. So that's where they've been thinking about it. So it really is, there is this question about they want to keep it to redeploy it, but at some point they either should deploy it in a way that's going to get a return, or they should give it back to shareholders, right? Because that is very high. But you think about it. Let's just compare. We think about these warehouses. The cost of a warehouse. Now, I don't expect any of you to know what the cost of a warehouse would be. But if you think about the cost of a warehouse, you often are going to think it's often somewhere. It depends on the business. But if you think of a store, and it depends on the types of stores. In grocery stores, because they're bigger and they have a lot more inventory than these, the warehouse is probably going to be only something like maybe 10 times the cost of a store. In this case, it's probably more like 30 or 40 times the cost of a store. So you're probably looking at somewhere between 5 to 10 million to build a warehouse. So let's say it's even 10 million, 50 warehouses. You've invested 500 million in warehouses. And then you had the shipping points. They're going to be a lot less than the warehouses. Probably, maybe 20%. So you're looking at then maybe, let's say, they're even 2 million, 1 or 2 million. So you maybe a couple million here. So you got another 100 million. So you take those two numbers and you spent 600 million in terms of your fixed assets in order to be able to rent DVDs to people around the United States and launch your business model versus Blockbuster's investment of 2.7 billion, right? You're both going to have inventories. This is really the big comparison. And you're also probably gonna have less labor here than you're gonna have in all the stores. And probably a little less inventory, because it's just more efficient to put them in bigger warehouses, and you can match supply and demand a lot better in the big warehouses. Jared?
So in the news recently, they talked about Netflix paying Comcast so that its movies and streaming content could be uninterrupted and not bogged down by a lack of bandwidth, competition for bandwidth with other streaming companies or whatever. Are deals like that where a company like Netflix ends up paying a large sum of money to like an ISP or a similar like person who delivers their content? Are those usually made very quickly? Are they usually thought about a lot so that it would be able to get the money needed for that from other resources instead of just its cash?
I think it really is going to depend a lot on the company and how they're trying to compete and what they're trying to achieve with this deal, this sort of relationship with this deal. I think it's probably hard to say that there's a particular approach that any company would use, at least in that particular situation. There are probably people that understand that better than I do, but I would say, boy, it would depend on a number of different factors. All right, so now we have Netflix that comes into this, and they start to take off, and they're doing really well. And then we've got Redbox that comes on. So, Blake, let's now look at Redbox to make sure we understand their approach.
Okay, so I think that the biggest thing that Redbox tries to solve, or the problem they try to solve, is kind of that impulse, wanting to watch a movie in the moment and being able to go and pick that up.
Okay.
And so, in terms of the market that they're competing in, definitely just the home DVD market, being able to rent those, bring them home.
Okay, so if we think about their unique value, it's immediately available, right? And especially it's convenient for the impulse.
Yeah.
Okay, user. Impulse user cannot use Netflix unless you're paying for streaming, and then you can't. So that's a new thing for Netflix. Okay.
And over here it said they were able to. It says by 2012, 68% of the U.S. population lives within a 5-minute drive of a Redbox kiosk.
Okay.
So a lot of people are very close to the Redbox kiosks.
So let's think about how this works here. They also probably have to have some sort of warehouse, do you think, where it starts?
Yeah.
So again, there's warehouse that's got to send out the DVDs, and then they go from there to
the kiosk.
the kiosk.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I know when Redbox was starting out, they joined with McDonald's, so they had locations at McDonald's stores.
Okay.
And that allowed them to take advantage of kind of higher traffic areas where families were going.
Yep. So you start with McDonald's. McDonald's actually is an investor early on, because they see this as a way to grab a Big Mac and grab a movie, and it's sort of, they think of it as compliments a little bit, right? And so this is a way that maybe they can bring people in, that you can not only buy your food, but you can grab your movie and go home.
Well, plus
Yeah.
you have to bring the movie back too. So
Yeah.
actually, you go back.
Yeah, that's right. So it actually, you might end up picking up some, so this should help drive traffic, right, Nathan? Yeah. So you get this, this helps, McDonald's with traffic. The other main distribution players are who?
Grocery stores.
Okay, so grocery stores, right? People are going to grocery stores regularly. Yeah.
Does that pay per night per DVD thing, do you count that as unique value, or do you count that as because it's different? I mean, with Blockbuster, you're paying for the DVD, you keep it for days or whatever. With Netflix, it's different. How would you classify it?
Yeah.
Well, just something that's interesting. I was over at my friend's house and I opened up their drawer. We were going to watch a movie, and they had like a drawer full of Redbox movies.
Right. But they hadn't taken back.
And I was like, why don't you just take it back? And they're like, I don't know, we forget. And so I think it was, I just thought it was interesting because whereas people could be, worried, oh, what if they don't bring back our DVDs? I actually think that is like a unique or a resource and capability, because they're making money when people don't bring the DVDs back. And so whereas people could see that maybe as a loss, like they're losing one of their DVDs, they just see it probably as a
Redbox is selling a lot more DVDs
Yeah.
than you think. Because people just, they're lazy, whatever, and they don't take them back. But we can't forget the value proposition. What's the cheapest way to watch a movie for a night? It's Redbox, right? I mean, it's been like a buck. You go, you pay a buck. This is the lowest price. You get it immediately. You do have to take it back the next day. If you don't, you actually end up buying it from them. But think about it. What's the price? What price do they charge for a DVD?
$1.20 now.
Anybody ended up buying one from Redbox that you weren't? Yeah. Phil?
So I ended up buying one. I think it cost 32, but I heard it's 25 now.
It's
And
like about 20.
they really got a steal because I ended up returning it after buying it. And so
There you go.
I got my $30.
So this is the perfect Redbox customer right here, because they want all of their customers to end up buying it and then returning it later. That's now there's a business model. But so I understand it's gone down to $25 as well. But think about it. What kind of return are they getting on a bought DVD? Pretty good. Let's assume they're even buying them for $5, $6, $7, whatever that might be. To sell it to you for 25 is pretty darn good, because you could probably have bought it in the store for 19 or 18, 19. So if you don't take it back and you buy it, they're making a really good return on it, and that helps with the profitability for this company. And then the low price helps them to really bring in people that don't want the hassle of signing up Netflix, dealing with streaming now. When I want a movie, I want to go get it. And it's those impulse users. But this is really the low price strategy in the marketplace. Right
So
now.
the one thing about Redbox is they tend to have between 70 and 200 DVDs selection in their kiosks for different titles, I guess. And so they definitely are focusing on more recent titles. And so you can't go to a Redbox and watch, your favorite old movie or whatever.
Okay, so they've got, how many kiosks do they have?
42,000.
Okay, so they're up to, I think, 46, 47,000, I think. So 47,000 kiosks. They don't have as many titles. So here you're getting 90,000 titles. Here you're getting 1,000, and here you're only getting maybe a couple hundred, right? So here, the 200 titles. So if we think about sort of disadvantage, you've got fewer titles that are available at the Redbox, and more just the recent ones. So if you want to watch old movies or things like that, Redbox isn't going to work for you. But if you're mainly just wanting to watch the new stuff as it comes out, Redbox works pretty well. They have to build 47,000 kiosks. What does that cost them?
15,000 per kiosk.
15,000 per kiosk. So as of 2014, 47,000. How much have they spent on kiosks? About 700 million.
Yeah.
So just take the 47,000 kiosks times 15,000. Okay, we have to bring out our calculators or sharpen our calculating skills. So we've got 47,000, and now that means their investment here is about 700 million. So now we think about comparing this business model with Blockbuster in particular. They've spent 700 million compared to 2.7 billion. So that's roughly what? One fourth? But then how many locations do they have compared to Blockbuster? Yeah, about 4 or 5 times the locations. So this is actually pretty good. If you think about, you spend 1/4 as much for 5 times the locations, right? So in terms of your bang for your buck, your return on that capital invested, you would expect, assuming you're renting similar number of movies, that this is actually going to be much more profitable. Yeah.
So, and also with Redbox, there's kind of a second level of, I guess, their business model, which is the streaming. Which in 2013, they said they partnered with Verizon to create a streaming service.
Okay. So now they add, and they do it here as well, of course. So they have streaming here, and they add streaming as well, and they're doing it with Verizon. Okay.
Now, for me and the streaming, I'd have to say the proof is in the pudding on that one. I've never tried the streaming service, so I don't really know what that's like. I don't know if anybody has ever tried Redbox streaming. But
Has anybody here tried Redbox streaming? Okay, so that.
I did their free trial.
You think they're what?
I did their free trial and they.
You did their free trial? So you just tried it out, and Ryan, was it any good?
I thought it was pretty much the same as Netflix.
Okay.
Didn't really see any difference.
But we don't have too many. Their penetration of this classroom is not very high, right? At least so far. How many of you didn't even know that Redbox had streaming? Raise your hand. Okay, so that's a problem. They really haven't done a lot of advertising. Even Redbox itself, if you look at their advertising, they really didn't do a lot of advertising. They left the advertising to the red boxes being in lots of locations and people seeing them and saying, oh, what's that? And then they learn about Redbox.
How is it different from Netflix? What is their differentiation? What do they do differently?
I don't think they have any differentiator relative to Netflix.
Okay.
What I think you have a challenge of is, one, you've got to get people to know about it. You got to get trial, and then apparently you didn't convert. And why didn't you convert?
Because I already had Netflix.
You already had Netflix. So you were just checking it out, just seeing, but you already had Netflix. So
I
you
wanted
didn't
to see if they had titles that Netflix didn't have that I wanted to watch. Because Netflix streaming doesn't have a lot of like new stuff,
Okay.
and Redbox is like known to have new movies, but their streaming doesn't have the new movies anyway.
So if you aren't getting the new movies from streaming,
Yeah.
then it doesn't bring much value.
Right.
Yeah, so the streaming's interesting because in terms of the actual streaming part of it, it's hard to create competitive advantage. Right? How do you create competitive advantage in streaming? Anybody? More selection. Yes.
I think one thing they said is that if you had the Redbox system plan, you could go to their kiosk once or twice a month and you could get a free.
You could pick it up too.
Yeah.
So it gives you both. All right, so what Redbox will be trying to offer is that we're going to give you both. Now, so we actually see ways of trying to differentiate. You can go to our kiosks, but you can also stream. And we think that will be an advantage. What has Netflix done to try to differentiate its streaming business? John?
It has its own shows now.
Yeah. Yeah, so they've tried to go back and pay for original shows so that you can only get it on Netflix. So that now helps differentiate their streaming, because the actual streaming doesn't make a big difference unless somehow the pipe to the home or the way you're getting it to the device, you've got sort of, it's better quality. Somehow it doesn't break up or whatever, but it's getting better and better now. But that's what they're trying to do. Yeah.
Initially, Netflix had partnered with Stars to try and get some like
Meaningful movies.
And now they're doing Disney because they know that parents who are at home with their kids just throw Netflix on the TV so mom can go do her thing and get the kids out of her hair.
Okay.
Can't wait.
Yeah.
Great.
Good. Yes.
One thing I had a question about is like the average cost of like being able to of Netflix being able to stream a movie on their site. I don't know if like if they do that on a like per movie basis or if they're partnering with movie production companies and like just saying any movie that you come out with we're able to stream, or I was a little unclear as to
If you
how
look
that
at their
works.
income statement, I don't know, did anybody look at their income statement? Look at their cost of sales. You see it is a little bit different for Netflix versus Redbox. And this is actually now where you get an interesting battle that's coming up between the two of them. Who makes more money? At least in the last few years, based upon data in the case, Redbox or Netflix? As a percentage of sales? Redbox actually does better than Netflix. What are their returns?
Their operating income in 2012 was 12.5%.
12.5%. So, and it's been going up a little bit, it looks like,
Yeah.
over time. So if we think about, you know, comparing return on sales for Netflix versus Redbox, Redbox is actually making a little bit higher return. I don't know, Jared, did you do an analysis on the assets? Or could you even get them?
Redbox?
Yeah, on Red.
Yeah,
on Red.
actually we just did that. So
Method 1 is 16%, and method 2 is 10%. So method 1 meaning total assets minus current liabilities.
Okay.
Right.
yeah, so 16% when you yeah, so when you just subtract cash, Redbox is getting a return on capital of about 16%, and when you do assets minus current liabilities, it's 10%.
Okay, so if we're doing the sort of apples to apples, it's more like 16% than over here in terms of the return on capital, right? All right. So, and what was the return on capital here again? Remember, 19 to 27%, right? So which one looks better? Logan?
I feel like Redbox is able to prey off the inherent laziness.
People, that's their target segment.
Well, it really
Yeah.
goes off too, because
No.
I have friends who get codes daily for free movie rentals, and for one night. Because Redbox knows that by giving them that one free night, they're going to forget for 3 more nights and force their hand to rent it for 3 days. And so, it's
They understand human nature, and let's face it, they're focusing on particular segment. Each of them are focusing on different segments of the market to some extent, right? So are these companies, are they competing with each other? Robert?
So we haven't really said it, but the real differentiating factor between Redbox and Netflix is that I can get new movies from Redbox and I can't get new movies from Netflix. That's why I go to Redbox, right? I would rather not drive to Smith's to pick up a movie for the night. I'd rather just go watch it on Netflix, but I can't.
They can get them faster than Netflix.
Yeah.
Because of the way they just go buy them and put them in their kiosks.
Yeah, but that has to do with the relationship with a provider. Like, for some reason, providers have this ironclad, like they're grasping onto the last profits that they have in the DVD market, and how it depends on how long that can last. If that can last long enough for Redbox to become a prominent streamer, then Redbox can take over. But if next year Netflix can get brand new movies streaming,
It could change the
business.
Okay? Okay?
I was just say I agree. I think I use both, right? And my friends use both. I have a Netflix account that all my friends do. How often do we use Redbox? Pretty often, I'd say once a week or twice a week.
How much do you pay for your Netflix account?
I don't know. It's a subscription, like $8 or something.
See, it's not enough. See, it's interesting. People are like, I don't know, how much do you
They take it every
as
month.
long as it's less than $10,
It's not
like,
big enough to think about.
Yeah, so it's like, you got to pay for your internet and your cable and,
I'm dropping
$8 for
$60
Netflix.
a month for my phone.
I might as well, I might as well just
$8.
throw it in. So you're actually using both,
Yeah.
okay? John?
I think the beauty of the Netflix system is the subscription. I don't know how many times I've gone to my parents' house and the same Netflix DVD that was there a month ago is still there because of that kind of inherent laziness. They kind of forget about it, but you're
But
still
at least I don't have to
paying
pay a late
month per
fee,
month,
right?
yeah.
And that's and Netflix loves that too. So both Netflix and Redbox love lazy people, right? And they understand something about customer behavior, and their business models both do well, in part because of that. Now, I just want to highlight a couple of things. Number one is you've got to be careful just looking at return on sales now, because the Redbox business model has more assets, right, involved because of the kiosks than the Netflix business model. And therefore, when you're looking at return on capital, it's the return on capital employed, which you're looking at the assets that you invest in the business to generate the returns. And typically an easy way to do that is you take your assets, you just look at your balance sheet, take the assets minus your cash. There are other more sophisticated methods, but assets minus cash gets you pretty close. And that gives you a sense of the return on the capital that's employed in the business to generate the return. So when companies are using similar business models, you can compare return on sales within an industry, and you're probably fine. But if they're using very different business models, you actually now have to start to look at the return on capital employed. The other thing you could see from this very clearly is that if you think about Blockbuster, Netflix comes in and they deliver the body blow. That now you can get more titles, right? You can rent multiple times, so it actually can end up being just as cheap, and it's more convenient. Their only source of competitive advantage is you can go to our store and get it tonight. They might have been able to survive without Redbox. So body blow and then knockout punch comes with Redbox. Because now, what is Blockbuster's competitive advantage? Nothing. You have to somehow live closer to the Blockbuster store than a Redbox kiosk. So it's complete luck, right? Because they've got 5 times as many kiosks out there, and the kiosks are located in places you're probably already going to, grocery store and so on. So Blockbuster, the one business model is better on certain dimensions. The other business model comes in and is better on the other dimensions. So Blockbuster now has no competitive advantage. And so once you see the first body blow, and as Netflix comes in, it tanks pretty quickly. But then when Redbox comes in, it very quickly becomes apparent that this strategy, this business model is not going to work. It's dead. Okay, so this is where you got to be really careful. As an incumbent, you think you might have a good position. 15 years ago, Barnes & Noble and Borders thought they were in a pretty good position, right? And it took like 10 years of Amazon going in, 12 years, and and Borders is killed. So these innovative new business models are the ways that we see sort of this waves of someone comes in with a new idea, a different business model, different resources and capabilities, hard to imitate, and then what you find is that the incumbents, if they don't respond quickly and adopt the new business model, they can be killed very quickly. Sorry, was the question? Yeah.
Yeah, it seems interesting that these disruptive technologies tend to be working with a product that's small, that doesn't require a large brick and mortar store. I mean, books, DVDs, things that are similar to this. So are there other, this is kind of a hypothetical question, are there other products out there that we associate with big, large stores that are smaller products that don't need to have a storefront? I mean, I think of some electronics. I mean, we have huge stores for small electronics. I mean, that's Best Buy, for example, but are there other types of business models that are very prone to disruption right now based on similar type of?
So I think we're seeing. So I remember think about buying a mattress. How many of you actually bought a mattress? Very few of you haven't. How many of you tried the mattress out before you bought it? Tried it on, yes. You lay on it. Do most people want to lay on a mattress before you buy it? Yeah. So stores should win, right?
Because you can try it out at a store but not pay the store and pay the other guy that does it cheaper.
Okay, so 1-800-Mattress is a company that used that very business model. So I remember buying a mattress when I was in Philadelphia, lived in Philadelphia, and basically what they did is they said, go try the mattress out, wherever you want, call us, tell us what mattress you like. And basically, they had to have different codes. They couldn't give you the exact same mattress. Because of the Simmons sort of the way they did their models, they could only have comparable models, but they couldn't actually give you the exact same model. But you tell them what model you liked, and they would say, that's fine, here's our price. It was usually 30% less than what you paid at the store. We'll ship it to your home, we'll set it up for you, you try it for 30 days, you don't like it, we'll swap it out, we'll give it to you a different one. So they're trying to take out the concern that it's not going to work. And what is essentially happening is 1-800-Mattress is free riding on the investment of their competitors in all of the showrooms, right? It's a serious. So there is an interesting question of what would happen if they run all of their competitors out of business, right? Then you don't have the showrooms. But the point is, this can work even in industries where you think there are products that you want to try out. And check out. Whereas like a book or a CD or renting a DVD, you know what you're getting, right? It's not like there's any, so it makes it much easier to do this online. All right, so if we think about this, and we think about streaming, we didn't really talk about Apple and Amazon. But if we think about different ways that companies are trying to differentiate, you could imagine that these companies bring different assets, resources, and capabilities to the table, that they might try and do it in a different way. How is Amazon trying to differentiate relative to Netflix? Anybody know? Anybody done streaming through Amazon? Okay, a few people. Do you have Amazon Prime? Yeah, so basically what they've done is they've bundled it. So if you're going to buy Amazon Prime, which gives you the free shipping, we'll throw in streaming. It's just another service. That could work very well for many segments of the market that buy a lot of products and services through Amazon. It's like, well, why do I need to do Netflix? It comes with Amazon Prime. So they're actually using a different approach because of the breadth of products that they sell.
It's
Yes?
kind of like a hybrid too, so you have access to certain shows and maybe certain free movies. Kind of a similar offering to Netflix, though it's kind of obscure free streaming. But then you can also rent brand new movies in streaming
That's right.
your subscription.
Yeah. And actually, if you want to get anything that's even close to new, you do have to pay for it. But they do have streaming. Andrew?
I guess that's what I was gonna say, that on Amazon, like on Netflix, I think I would be willing to pay for my, like, when I wanna watch the movie, and I'd be willing to pay for it if I didn't have to leave my home. Amazon provides that convenience. I don't have to go to a Redbox. I am paying $3 to rent it for 24 hours or whatever the case is. But I just wanna watch a movie. And so I think Amazon's offering is a lot more competitive because you do get some of the movies free. But being able to buy it right then, if your movie's not on there on instant streaming, I don't have to wait 3 days. I can just purchase it immediately and buy it.
Yeah. All right, so I'm not going to go. We've sort of hit the main points for the comparisons of those business models. Let me just highlight then that we are going to now be talking about some of these different categories of innovative strategies, and there may be other ones that haven't been categorized yet. But this one turns out to be reconfiguring the value chain to eliminate activities is the way Netflix is able to disrupt Blockbuster. Because they basically eliminate the stores, right? So you go in, you eliminate a step in the value chain. What Redbox does is they don't eliminate the step altogether, they change the step from a store to a kiosk. Right? So there's another way, and it's a much lower cost way. So again, reconfiguring the value chain, which means, again, the business model, the activities that you engage in to deliver the unique value you're trying to deliver to your customers. And that's what new business models are trying to do, that you are trying to deliver value in a very different way. And so when you think about, you've got your overall strategy, which is, here's what our unique value is. We're low price, we're differentiated, or we're more convenient, you can pick the things. And then the business model really helps clarify how you're trying to deliver that unique value to customers. And it's sort of related to the resources and capabilities, the processes that you use to deliver that unique value. Okay, we'll see you on Wednesday.